Hello.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi. Good to
How
see
are
you,
you?
Ilangho. Good. How you
Yeah, good to
doing?
see you. Yeah, I'm fine. So, how is the audio video quality?
Good. How about on my end? Can you hear me okay?
Good, excellent. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So, congratulations on your new career.
I hope so. I still have day jobs. We'll see what happens.
We have about an hour, right, today.
Yeah. Somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour, something like that.
So, what would be the topic today we are discussing?
Whatever you want. I know you've had from what I gather from your story, you've had some glimpses based on Kundalini Shaktipat, things like that.
Correct.
And I know that you've established certain criteria that you see in sages, people who have
No,
gone
no,
through
that
the
was
shift
just
in
my,
perspective.
my own research on this for the last about 10
It's
months,
interesting though, yeah.
based on 30 years, and I just discussed this with. You're recording this?
Yes.
So this was just reflected off a few, enlightened persons. So I just thought since there was no established criteria except the Vedic Satchitanand, so might as well start doing something. So I just started from scratch, sort of. So you are coming in as a teacher now, isn't it, of non-Advaita?
A speaker, a guide, a friend, yeah.
You are you shying from the word teacher? Because a
Well,
lot of
it's
speakers
not
do
something
that.
that can be taught, so
Then, but see, you're now probably going to establish a career out of this.
hopefully. But hope is
Yeah,
rooted in fear, so maybe
yeah,
that's the wrong word too.
yeah. But then when there is a profession, people want to hear something to be helpful to them.
Yes, and that was something I wanted to talk to you about,
Yeah.
kind of like you were saying, in the radical non-duality communities, they give the seeker some method even though there isn't one, and I was thinking about that, and to be honest with you, it's along the lines of I could probably give you methods for things like kundalini awakening or seeing a body of light, or but for enlightenment itself, it doesn't work that way because
But do you,
it's
yeah, but do you accept the term enlightenment? Because a lot of people shy away from that.
yeah, I would say awakening is enlightenment. Yeah, the non-dual shift in perspective is awakening,
Okay,
is
I
enlightenment,
am
is the
very
natural
clear with,
state.
yeah, I am very clear with one thing that I am a seeker. Though I have had those awakenings, I've lost them. So basically, I am a seeker. Now, as I look at you, I look at you as a teacher, and there are only two types of teachers I have seen. One is the the usual Vedic, that there is a guru, there is a disciple, they live with them in an ashram or they teach something, and they say x plus y the whole square is equal to x square plus 2xy plus y square, and then the disciple is supposed to follow that, and at the end of a certain amount of time, it could be from instantaneous to maybe 10 years or even a lifetime or many lifetimes,
Yeah, or
the
40
seeker
years. Yeah.
yeah, the seeker gets it. That is one side of the spectrum. The other side is the present post Tony Parson crowd of, yeah, no one speaking nothing to nobody. Now I want to know, where does Andrew come in? Where is he placed in this? It's a big spectrum from zero to infinity.
Yeah, I'm somewhere between it all, I think. There's a little bit of Zen, Advaita, Kashmir Shaivism, Dzogchen, radical non-duality. It's all there.
All
I've
wrapped up
kind of
into
they're
one.
like layers in a way, yeah. But I think that radical non-duality is very potently clear and helpful, especially toward the end of the journey. The final self-inquiry. Being the final
What do you mean by radical
step.
non-duality?
What most people would call neo-Advaita in a derogatory way. Radical non-duality would be that neo-Advaita.
That is post Tony Parson. Post Tony Parson.
Essentially, the way of expressing it is 1995 and onward. But kind of like the way Tony would put it is, this is the clearest way we've found to put it so far. So that's why people are putting it this way if they're trying to be clear, because it's the clearest way we've found to put it in words so far as a collective.
So post 20%, there was a radical shift in the way Advaita was looked at. Though ultimately Advaita also advises the nothing, no one to no one, but it had a method. Whereas post 20%, that is what they call as radical Advaita. The latest, no one talking to nobody, nothing. Correct? Yeah. And you place yourself right in the middle. You're a midfielder.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the mix of it all, I guess. But yeah, I find that to be the clearest way to put it. But again, I know it can be kind of frustrating if we only limit ourselves to that. So I'm not trying to only limit ourselves to that. I think that's kind of like the final step, if you will, or the clearest, most direct way. But it can frustrate the seeker, and that's a good thing. But if that's taken too far, that can cause more suffering. And the goal is to end suffering, enlightenment, awakening, non-dual shift in perspective. So I don't want to overly or underly frustrate the seeker, if you will. There's a sweet spot, a Goldilocks zone.
Okay. So what is enlightenment according to you? The definition of enlightenment. Suppose we ask you to define enlightenment. You're a software. You're basically a software engineer, web designer, right?
I do telemarketing.
Okay.
For a day job, I do web design as my other day job, and I do this now. So,
what is the definition of enlightenment according to you?
Enlightenment is when the identity goes away entirely. So the individual sense of self, the sense of separation that we call an individual self, a me, goes away spontaneously.
What is the me? What is the me according to you?
The me is the ego mind.
So what is the mind according to you?
There isn't one.
But you just now told ego mind, right?
Yeah, there's no mind.
When I asked you what is the me, you said it is the ego mind. So what do you mean by that?
It's like an evolved mechanism to seem separate so that the body stays alive longer. And when that falls away, the body is less likely to survive and yet experiences liberation.
It's a bit vague. Can you be more specific?
I can try.
Because we have to be frank here, right? End of
it's the end of suffering. Because it's the end of me. So if me goes away, there's no one there to suffer. And that's why it's the end of suffering. And that's why it's the end of seeking.
End of suffering is excellent. That's an excellent criteria. That is one of my 4 points I had kept. End of suffering was
exactly. And you were saying there was like 3 or 4 established criteria for
one. That is what one is that there is no doership. Do you have it?
Right.
Do you have doership?
Yeah, there's no
doership.
No. There's nobody there to do or not do.
There is no separation between Andrew and Ilangho. The second. The third is end of suffering. You don't have suffering. The fourth is bliss. That is no reason for joy. These are the 4 things I kept. Now coming back to you, coming back to your, the loss of the me. Different speakers and teachers say the me as different. According to Andrew, what is the me? When I asked you what is the me, you said it is the egotic mind. Could you be more,
Yeah, it's the dialogue, it's the languaging, it's the language-based emergent property of awareness, but it's kind of like falling out of. It's basically like in the Garden of Eden in the Bible, they fall out of paradise. They fall out of the Garden of Eden. They fall out of the natural state. So all the animals are already in that natural state, but human beings somehow develop an ego and fall out of that natural state, usually around age 8.
8? Around the age of 8, you said, is it?
For the average person, probably around the age 8.
Okay. As a seeker, can I ask you whether my thinking about me is right? Me is an energy or a language software inside the brain somewhere,
right?
Which says, I am this body, I am this mind, and I am separate. I am autonomous, and I have the power to do what I want. That
Right.
is the me, correct?
Yeah.
And when the
Yeah.
me falls away, the separation falls away. So that is what is
Yeah.
enlightenment all about.
And
But
because suffering falls away, that's why seeking falls away. So you can't just call off the search, like they say. You can't do that. You can't just end seeking to then end suffering. It doesn't work that way. Suffering spontaneously ends because the me spontaneously ends. And because suffering ends, that's why seeking ends.
so, what is the relationship between the me and the suffering and the enlightenment? Is there a connection? One goes first, the second goes, or they both together? It's
It's all at
simultaneous,
once. It's
all
all at
at once.
once.
What is the mechanics behind the loss of the me and the loss of the suffering? So the me is the cause of the suffering, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So once the me drops away, the suffering goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because there's nobody left to suffer. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to ask you was because you're in the middle, uh, though you are enlightened and though the sense of doership is gone and there is no separation, suppose I meet you in a cafe and I call Andrew, you will turn around, right?
Yeah.
How does that happen when there is no me inside and there is no one inside? If I call Andrew, you shouldn't actually register, but you're registering that Andrew there. How does it happen
It's
when there is no one inside?
registering. It's like if you thought my name was Rumpelstiltskin, and I knew that you thought my name was Rumpelstiltskin. You said, "Hey, Rumpelstiltskin," I'd still turn. It might not be as quickly or as a knee-jerk reflex,
No,
but it would happen.
what I'm trying to ask is that is there still a faint sense of identity still there in Andrew and in all the enlightened persons for the sake of survival or whatever reason? Because when I call Andrew, Andrew turns back, and Jim doesn't turn back. Andrew turns
Yeah,
back, which means there is some sense of identity still sticking there.
there's still a functioning. We just don't
Function.
identify with that functioning. So in the same way that I'm wearing this shirt, and I know I'm wearing this shirt, at no point do I fully identify with this shirt and get tricked that, oh, I'm this shirt. And the same thing applies to the body and even more to the mind. I would sooner say I'm this body than I'm this mind, because there isn't a mind. And there's only a oneness or a noneness.
So the next question would be like, is there a method Andrew has for seekers and future his whatever you call your followers or your disciples, the students, your friends, blah blah blah, whatever you want. People are going to follow you over the next years and decades. What what is it that you're going to offer them, which will remove their suffering? Because now, as a seeker, I look at enlightenment as end of suffering, nothing else,
Yeah.
nothing very fabulous like trumpets blaring and
Right.
flowers falling from heaven, which I used to think earlier during the Vedic times. It was like it was,
Yeah.
but then after listening to the Buddha's teaching, which earlier I thought was very naive and very infantile, now as age progresses, you understand that it is the end of suffering a human being wants. So, does Andrew have a method? And if so, what is it? What would you propose?
Well, unfortunately, I can probably give methods, secret, esoteric methods, and they would only really probably give you more glimpses, which may or may not make you more or less frustrated, which may not increase or decrease your suffering. So I don't know if that's even a good idea, because there is the potential to increase suffering. But I have a sneaking suspicion of what might have led to the Kundalini awakening that was experienced here at age 24, or the body of light.
You had a Kundalini
Diamond
awakening, isn't it?
vehicle would have. Yeah, when
You
I
had a
was
Kundalini awakening.
24.
Was
Yeah.
it spontaneous or somebody transferred it?
Yeah. Um, it was spontaneous.
So you accept
But
there is something called as a Kundalini.
yeah, even Shaktipat isn't always it can also happen in a subtle way, spontaneously. I think that my voice carries Shakti in a certain way. It's just subtle. So there's a subtle transmission going on right now, for example. It's just probably not detectable. But I don't necessarily do the conscious, Shaktipat.
So somebody who's not an Indian and doesn't understand the Vedic language, what would you explain Shaktipat as?
So it's the transference or the transmission of a current that is a lot like electromagnetism, but different from it, a more rarefied, primordial life force energy that underlies the cosmos and creates it and guides it, structures it.
So you believe in that?
Well, it's all happening in a dream. I
So
believe in it in the same way that I believe that I'm wearing a shirt right now and I'm sitting in a room, but I know that's an illusion too. So any experience you could have is imaginary.
So what is not an
Dream.
illusion then? If all this is a dream and an illusion, what is reality according to you?
Reality is virtual. All realities are virtual. Every layer of every reality is virtual. If there's an astral realm, it's virtual. If there's a physical world, it's virtual. If there's a causal realm, there's nobody there to experience it. So there's no reality.
So then what is not virtual? Because when you say virtual, then the opposite of it.
What isn't virtual can't be spoken of. So we can only speak of what is virtual and seeming and apparent.
Is there something that is not virtual which cannot be spoken of?
It isn't a something, so no. We might call it nothing or nothing, or the Tao.
There is something. There is something.
Or if you look, or you know, if you say Buddha nature or Shiva, really what we're talking about is emptiness.
So you accept there is something called as emptiness, Tao, or whatever.
There's an emptiness for sure. That's the one way to say it. Some speakers might say there is no essence, and what they mean by that is that the essence is emptiness.
Now, when you say about the Shakti path and the Kundalini, then you mean that there is a technique in which you can transfer it to somebody. Am I to gather that?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I probably, if I tried to go learn how to do that, I might be able to figure it out. But I don't think that, again, that could backfire. It could create more suffering, and that more suffering could lead to someone taking their life, etc. So, you know, someone who undergoes a spontaneous Kundalini awakening is sometimes suffering a great deal before that and after that. So that's not liberation. It's interesting. It launched me seemingly into an astral samadhi, but I still suffered after that. So that's not enlightenment or awakening, even though we call it Kundalini awakening. The energy went up and out, and I was seemingly in my body and in this astral layer at the same time. But the physical world and that layer are illusory. They're both illusory. They're both a dream.
You mentioned in your awakening about a geometric figure above your head. Could you explain on that?
Yes, when I was 27, about 5 months before the non-dual shift in perspective hit me, awakening. Yeah, and we're talking about a technique. You know, what could lead to a Kundalini awakening? What could lead to seeing this geometrical shape, this body of light, this Merkaba, this it seemed to be a dodecagonal trapezohedron of crystalline light spinning. And my first thought was, oh, that's me. So there was still identification at that stage of the journey, but it wasn't. And the way I can explain it is this shape. If you ever played the game The Sims, it's kind of like a bad Sims joke, you know. It was similar in shape. But
How long
I
did
saw
this last?
Oh, a few minutes, less than 5 minutes probably.
But
and even the astral,
you were able to see it. It was not a hallucination, sort of. You were able to see it.
It was, for example, I don't have schizophrenic tendencies or anything like that. I've never seen a UFO. I've never seen a being in the room. So I've had a handful of really intense experiences. And, you know, if I saw dragons every day, it would be different. But because it only happened 3 times in my life, for example, I experienced what I can only refer to as astral vision. It's kind of, it was the type of thing where I saw it and I realized I was it, even more identified with it than the body. And it wasn't a shape I had read about. It wasn't the star tetrahedron Merkaba. That's not how it presented itself. Maybe it was spinning so fast it created an illusion of a different shape, but it looked like a trapezohedron of some kind. And I had the idea of, you know, the same way that I have a hand, a head, and a foot all at the same time. and all at the same time, that's me. Also, this shape, all at the same time. It's just another dimension, if you will, of being. And yet 5 months later, all identification left me
At
upon
the
awakening.
instance of this thing on top, was there a shift in you, in your perception? It was the start of the awakening or something like that?
There must have been on some level, yeah.
Was there a sense of loss of me and there was no separation? No.
Well, there was a shift in what I perceived myself to be because I was more identified with that shape. And so there was a disidentification with the body a little bit, but only relative to the I was more identified with that geometric shape than this shape of the human body or this face. And so because of that, and I'll tell you the technique, what is it that led, I think, to the Kundalini awakening? What is it that led, I think, to this body of light experience? If I had to guess, basically, I was drawn spontaneously to go enter into formal seated meditation posture out of the blue. I don't usually meditate, almost never. When I do, I have certain experiences like seeing the spiritual eye Yogananda talks about, the indigo blob with the gold ring around it. I see that when I meditate. I don't meditate very often, but I don't see the white star in the middle that he talks about. But I did see this white light, and I wonder if that's what he was talking about, the white star in the middle. I don't know. But the technique that I think led to this spontaneously, it told me to do the 3 bandhas, the 3 locks, but it told me to do the 4th one too. And I had been doing this technique for many years, every day, and that's Kachari Mudra.
So coming back to the question which I had, started this part of the discussion was, so was there a method for your enlightenment? You did this
No.
or many things and then this happened?
Well, by method, you could say being involved in the radical non-duality community for 7 years. You could call that a method. Like, for example, I joined Exploding Rainbows as a seeker for a few years. I was a seeker in that group. And it's frustrating sometimes. It's like bashing your head against the wall to try to understand this stuff. And I understand that frustration because I was a frustrated seeker. When I hear these non-duality, Tony Parsonian type dialogues, I was freaking out. A lot of these groups, a lot of these speakers that have that, I was freaking out and reacting and saying, what do you mean there's no doer? What do you mean there's no self? This is bullshit. And now I know it. And now on the other side of that, now I'm saying that because that's what's going on.
Now, apart from Exploding Rainbows, you were doing a lot of yogic mudras and
a little bit.
So were they part of your enlightenment?
I think for me it was. I think for me, the energetic layer of it that a lot of these speakers won't talk about, either because they didn't experience it or because they don't want to go there so they can stay safe.
They can stay safe. Safe of what?
Well, from being attacked, it's it takes a certain type of courage to be wrong, and or to be called out.
For even an enlightened person who's supposed to be fearless, that's one of the definitions for enlightenment.
Yeah.
Fearlessness.
Yeah. Well,
see, even Tony Parsons and a lot of speakers I've spoken to who are in the radical New Advaita, they have always followed. It's very rarely I've seen a spontaneous teacher. I mean, there have been spontaneous awakenings happening to certain people, but most of the speakers have undergone. For example, Tony Parsons was in a lot of things from Osho's camp to this, that, left, right, front, and center, but he doesn't attach it, and a lot of other speakers also don't attach it. Anyway, coming back, there was
probably an energetic thing going on there. A lot of people, we don't know, but in certain groups or areas or people, whether you like them or not, they might have some kind of energy going on that sparks off. You might hate that person, and that energy might still spark off and create an experience in you, for example.
Just to reiterate, my experience when I was 27 years old, I never knew anything about, though an Indian, I never knew anything about Advaita philosophy. I meet a teacher, within 5 minutes I get an awakening, and it was through a Kundalini. And she was telling, you put your hand towards me and receive it. That was how it happened. So we don't know. Anyway, coming back to Andrew, now he's launched his career as a professional speaker. and he wants to help people. Am I right? That is
Yeah.
the aim. That is the aim of your, or is it there is
Yeah.
no aim, like most speakers say? They
Well,
just
I
come.
don't. Yeah, on a certain level, I don't care what happens because I'm just enjoying it. It's selfish of me, and I just thoroughly enjoy doing this, talking to people. On another level, I hope to end my suffering over there. I hope to
Correct.
awaken over there,
Yeah,
as you.
that's good.
You know,
So
so
what is your method?
it's still selfish.
As ultimately, we are, clothed animals. I mean, enlightened or not, all of us are clothed
Yeah,
animals, and the selfish intent is always there. That is always there. That's
on
okay. But
some level. Yeah.
as long as that selfishness has an inbuilt common, motto of helping people, that is supposed to be
Yeah.
virtuous. That's the definition of virtuosity in human life.
Well, there is no virtue. That's why Socrates used to walk around going, "So tell me, what is virtue?" Because there isn't one. And he was messing with people that thought they knew because they were in the dualistic mind. And so he wanted to expose the ignorance of the dualistic mind. Socrates was rumored to have lived in the forest, and then he came into town. So he's kind of like a wild animal. And that's what an awakened human is they have rewilded themselves. They've shut down the domestication somehow, and they were probably born more wild, you know
Exactly.
um yeah.
So, what is Andrew's method for the seeker? Have you devised a method, or are you in the process, or is it ready-made now? You can tell me. I'm a seeker online. Maybe the first time you're
Again,
telling somebody.
there's no real method other than just kind of in a controlled manner, in a Goldilocks zone, just right manner of kind of bashing your head off of this stuff. There's real no. That's why I said it's kind of like you have to toggle the threshold of your frustration so that it's not too much frustration and it's not too little frustration. And the frustration means you're still trying and still seeking, and even that can,
How do you?
it's really.
A lot of abstract words. How do you do it? For example, I'm just telling you. Imagine I am a soldier, and I have a sniper rifle with a telescope. I know the target 5 miles away. You show me the
Yeah.
target, teach me how to fire the rifle, and I hit the target.
Yeah.
So enlightenment, according to Andrew, tell me as a seeker, what should I do?
So
Do,
it's
for
saying
example, get up in the morning,
what can the
meditate. This.
me yeah what can the me do to get to the point where there's no me and no doer? Well, there
Yeah.
already is no me and no doer. So how could a me
No,
do something to get to a no me, no doing?
no. 4 years ago in Andrew, there was the me. Don't tell me there was no me. There was a me,
There
right?
seemed to be a me, and there still probably seems to be a me from other
When
people's
I when I
perspectives.
call you when I call you as Andrew. So how to dissolve the me? That would be the aim of the enlightenment. That would be my
Yeah,
rifle.
I see what you're
My rifle
saying.
shot should be hit the me.
Yeah,
Now who's going
I
to hit
got
the
you.
me
How to
within me?
kill? Yeah, how do you
How to
kill the
kill the me?
ego? How to
How to
kill the
kill the
mind?
me?
Yeah,
How to kill the me?
yeah.
Is
By
there a method?
starving it. Yeah, by starving it.
And how do you starve it? Next step.
By the same way Tony Parsons does it, basically uncompromisingly not giving it an inch. But that's very frustrating.
But how do you do
And
that?
so
Tony
because
Parsons
it's
says that.
frustrating, you don't want to do that.
Yeah. But is
You
there a
say, what do I
method
do?
to
There is
that?
no you, there is no doer. And then it goes, well, I don't like that. Next. What's the next thing? No, you skipped it. Go back. You keep avoiding that's the thing. The mind doesn't want to hear how it can die because then it'll die. So there's a mechanism built in. It's almost like if you tried to physically kill yourself, some part of your body would stop you, even if you really wanted to do it. And obviously, I want people to keep the body healthy, very healthy. It's very precious. But the self needs to go bye-bye.
You mean the me?
So yeah.
The me?
So you're
The me?
asking me how to assassinate the self.
Which means we presuppose that there is another part inside the seeker which could assassinate the me. When we say
And there
assassinate the
is no
me,
me. So how could
but
you
then
kill it?
how can you assassinate something which is not there?
Right. Exactly.
No, I am
What
telling
method?
that
Yeah.
there is a me, and that you have to assassinate the me.
Seemingly. So it's kind of like saying, how do I kill Mickey Mouse or Santa Claus or a unicorn? Well, first you're gonna have to find it to kill it. There
Yes,
isn't one.
yes.
So how do you find what isn't there to then kill it? You can't.
No, that is no, Andrew. What I'm telling is, me is an energy inside me claiming I am doing it. It is an energy like a kundalini.
It's like a programming.
It is an energy like, the sun, the moon, the star, or any electromagnetic spectrum. Somewhere in the brain or around the astral body, there is a software which is claiming everything which is happening on the screen. So why do you say it is illusory? It is there. You have to hit it, remove it, use an antivirus, hack and remove it. And then enlightenment happens.
It's like a ghost of a ghost in the brain.
It is, don't say it is a ghost. Why do you say it's a ghost when it is a
ghost
software?
Of a ghost. Yeah, it's a software.
See, for example, when you're seeing photons hit the eye from the light here, and the photons go and create a chemical reaction, which creates an electrical reaction, which goes into the brain, and there is a software there. You claim the vision is real, hearing is real, tasting is real, smelling is real, touching is real. But when a thought process happens, that is also real. It's an energy. A thought is an energy. Every thought is an energy. It is not abstract. Every thought is energy. You know the Einstein famous equation, E is equal to mc squared. Everything which is mass has got energy. So every energy can be turned into mass. A thought is actually an internal.
So if it's
an internal
relative,
sound.
It's all relative. So from the perspective of the photon, time isn't moving. So how does the photon move? Does it go back through time? How does that work? Even that's mysterious. We have no idea how that works.
No, even physics does not know definition of time. They talk about the quartz. Even Einstein never knew. Newton mislabeled it. Till now, we don't know what time is.
Because there isn't one.
That's again debatable. You asked me to come at 9:30 my time. Still, you're playing around with words. Like you fix your appointment and then you say, we don't know about the time part of it. But coming back to the me, when we accept there is a body, when we accept there is a mind, then there is some part of me which is claiming this. Why do you say that is illusory? That is also a fact. The moment you kill it, you get enlightenment. Would you agree on that? We have to target something. Suppose you sit down here.
It feels like the me dying, but really it didn't die because it was never born and doesn't exist now. So it feels like the me.
It doesn't exist for you because you've got enlightenment. But for seekers who are still not reached the Garden of Eden,
it seems real for them. Yeah.
It seems real, and it is claiming it is. See, in human life, the most important part, according to the Buddha, was the suffering. And this me is the villain. This me is the villain, and you say it is not real. It's a software. It's an energy bundle which claims everything happening. It claims everything happening, and unless we identify that and remove that, how will we get enlightenment? A lot of teachers speak about this. They speak about, for example, Lisa Keynes and Roger Castillo, and a lot of people speak about that me is a certain type of energy. And I have myself done a little bit of research and found this energy is basically a language software which was installed by our mother calling Andrew and Ilangho. The moment she called, a separation happened, and slowly my father, my surroundings, my school, and my society started teaching me that I am an individual animal capable of being separate and autonomous, and the me started developing. You say 8 years, Tony says 1.5 years. We don't know. We have to research on that. We don't know. But somehow the separation happened with the naming process. So according to me, the me is actually a language bug inside the brain. You see, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, suppose I asked you, you come with a chest pain, take a ECG or an X-ray, you would be laughing at me. You would think I'm a witch doctor and I would be beheaded or put at the stake. But now we know we have CT scan machines, we have functional MRIs, you can map the brain. 100 years from now, the energy body or the astral body probably will be mapped. And there the me will also be mapped. It's somewhere inside or somewhere around. I don't know where it is. Or it is in the cloud computing. The me as a software of the human being, if it is identified, it can be targeted. And everybody gets enlightenment. You walk into a shop, plug on, and you have your me gone away. Now, short of that happening through an artificial intelligence, what would Andrew's advice be as a speaker/teacher? How to remove the me? Is there a method?
Yeah, it's interesting because, there is an energetic component to it. I think you're right in that sense, because the shift, a lot of people talk about the shift as if it's occurring in the brain, but we don't know that to be the case necessarily. And even if it did, there's a correspondence with electromagnetic activity there. So if something electromagnetic influenced the brain, then it would have a corresponding shift in consciousness, for example. And I did have a type of energetic component to my experience that seemed to accompany. I hate to use the word trigger the awakening because might not be that way. It did definitely accompany it, And kind of like you were talking about how you saw when you did have the half hour of oneness, you saw the energy in the leaves. And I had
Yeah,
that experience too for, oh God, maybe 3 weeks straight, where I could see the shimmering, almost like sunlight absorbed into the bugs and the grass and flowing through the trees, and very, very sensitive to that energy. So there are definitely, for me anyway, I can't speak for the other speakers. I can only speak from this perspective. And for me, there definitely is this energetic layer to all these experiences. And it is inherently mysterious, especially for the limited human understanding. So upon awakening, you no longer need, you no longer have the urge to understand or know anything. Anything beyond what time are we going to meet for the Zoom meeting? Do you want popcorn with the movie? What time does the movie start? When's the babysitter arriving? That's the extent to knowledge. And upon awakening, it's realized that the limits of human knowing and understanding are much closer than they appear. And once you realize that you've basically already reached that limit of understanding and knowing, the urge for understanding and knowing falls away, because the seeking mind is trying to understand and know conceptually in order to end the suffering. It's trying to be an intelligent mammal and do something, to use the neocortex, to do something to end the suffering, because it's so used to doing that. It's so used to doing that. I'm thirsty. Okay. I'm the body. I'm thirsty. Go get some water. Go get some water. Get some water. Oh, now I'm not thirsty. Yep, this works. And it keeps doing that. But when it comes to awakening, it's unlike anything else, and it's so different from everything else that the brain is still using that mode, the survival mode, the same way it does water and protection and shelter and food. It's trying to use that programming to access awakening, but really we might call that a spiritual intelligence that is needed and is seemingly subtle from the seeker's perspective. And from the seeker's perspective, it's frustratingly too subtle. And from the awakened perspective, it's effortlessly too obvious. And I know that doesn't sound inherently helpful.
have you read Paul Hederman? Have you heard him? Paul Hederman.
What's that?
Hederman, Paul Hederman, American teacher.
Oh, I've heard of him. I don't think I've really checked him out as thoroughly as I probably should have by now, but I've heard of him. Yeah.
Byron Katie. Byron Katie.
Yeah, I like Byron Katie, the work. I noticed you mentioned that. I do like that. I talk about her once in a while when I'm trying to help seekers that are kind of up against a wall. I think her work is very helpful for seekers because it's kind of like a cognitive behavioral therapy. It
It
helps you
goes into the
understand, to what extent is your story being delusional? Because at the end of the day, if you tell yourself a story that makes you feel wonderful, I don't see a need to shut it down, even if it's delusional. But if you're telling yourself a delusional story that's causing suffering, and it's even more suffering on top of the me, then yeah, we can get rid of that. It won't necessarily get rid of the me, but it will get rid of some of that extra suffering that's piled on top of it. And there's a lot of things that can get rid of suffering that aren't just awakening. And
So
yet
Andrew,
awakening
coming
is the
back to
end
your
of suffering.
methods, coming back to your methods for the end of suffering. Like, is there a three-point method or a 5-point method? Or
I can't give a method for awakening itself, but I can give methods for deepening meditative states. I can give methods for potentially increasing the likelihood of something like a Kundalini awakening, or seeing a so-called astral body of light, or experiencing samadhi. But there's really no method that can be given for how to shift into that non-dual natural state, because it's not something that can be understood by the non it can't be understood by the ego mind, the languaging mind, the me, the self. It can't be understood by that arena of the programming. And so if we only address it within that arena of the programming, because it's over here, it's not in this, it's over here.
do you have a free will? What is your opinion on free will versus destiny?
No, there's no free will, not even a little bit. I used to think when I was a seeker, oh, maybe 95% of this is automatically occurring, but I'm metacognitively aware of this 1 to 5%. Nope, none.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
And if you have a glimpse like Kundalini and you don't experience full-on liberation, you are given glimpses of the fact that the body can automatically move itself, for example. It might do a spontaneous yoga asana or something. You go, oh, wow, why is it doing that? And you realize, okay, the body's just spontaneously behaving, at least for a moment, but really that's showing you behind the scenes that it's always doing that. It's always spontaneously, just like a cat with a toy. It's the same thing in the human. Even though we're seemingly more self-aware, all that's really doing is causing suffering. It's not giving us free will. But within the neocortex, it gives us the illusion of free will.
Who were the teachers who were like, you could say, like, milestones in your life, especially for spirituality, who were important?
That's hard to say. I was kind of
teachers.
at this alone in a way. I mean, I guess I kind of just picked a little bit. I kind of got a little bit from each thing that I read or looked at. But I like the yoga of Lahiri Mahasaya, for example. Yogananda's Guru's Guru. I really appreciate the pure, unadulterated potency of Lahiri Mahasaya's yoga for things like Kacharya Mudra and Kundalini awakening. But I can't really pinpoint any particular teacher. I really like Bodhidharma, for example. I really resonate with Bodhidharma very, very potently. And I used to be into Zen for years and years. I was into Vajrayana Buddhism and had read a bit about Dzogchen, and I'm into Kriya Yoga, but really I'm somewhere between kind of Kashmir Shaivism, Taoism, Buddhism and Veda. It's all kind of mixed together because it's all the greater picture. One system doesn't really capture it or explain it all.
So how come after a couple of years you suddenly started launching yourself? You stayed quiet for all these years.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of happened. It's hard to explain. But I just suddenly felt the urge to explore this in a new format. And I think, I don't know. Part of it is just I've always enjoyed having, what's that?
Destiny, they say in India.
I can't argue with that. I can't bring myself to argue with that. The radical non-dual part of me wants to jump in there and say there's no destiny. But as soon as I go to do that, it's like, well, you kind of have a point. Because there's no free will. So you can call it destiny if you want. Sure. Yeah. Or another way to put it is essentially that liberation is inevitable. It's imminent. Eventually.
To everybody, you mean?
Yeah, everyone dies, for example, or the body dies, for example. So perhaps it's the case that everyone experiences liberation, in the last 3 seconds of life or something.
We don't know.
Yeah. And in those 3 seconds, you realize, oh, there never was a problem. There never was any real suffering. I never existed as that. I never existed as not liberation. I never existed as not freedom, not limitlessness. And so limits are a beautiful thing. They're not just this crushing matrix overlord thing. Limits are beautiful. Ask any database programmer. Ask any simulation programmer. Ask any AI programmer. The limits are beautiful. It allows it to function and to have a very powerful functioning. And this all seems real. Isn't that a miracle? The miracle, in a way, is that this all seems real. And yet the realness can cause suffering. So it's good to realize that this is neither real nor unreal. It's real enough. It's also unreal enough. It's sufficiently real and it's sufficiently not real. So you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but what do you mean by unreal?
There is no universe. There is no time and space. There is no brain.
Yeah, but what is this? I mean, you can touch yourself. What
is an illusion.
That? How do you say that? It's again a belief system, right? What I want to tell you was even the most radical post 20% or 20%, everybody put together, when they say there is no one teaching nothing to nobody and everything is an illusion, that is a big belief again. Another, board on a dog, like saying there is nobody. Again, that's a belief, isn't it? That there is nothing is a belief. Am I right or wrong?
I don't think it's, I mean, it's more than a belief.
How do you say that? Because it's yours? Because it belongs to the radical Neo-Advaita team and you're part of the team, you have to defend yourself?
Yeah, everybody
When you
wants to be
say
right,
that,
I guess.
I know, no, I don't want to be right. I want to find the truth. That's the difference. That's why,
Yeah,
I
that's the
can even,
thing, you know.
I can duck out of any situation, because if you
I
tell
love
me
when I'm
something
wrong.
correctly.
Yeah, I love when I'm wrong, because then
That's
I
very
learn
rare, very
something
rare.
and I can become even clearer. Yeah.
No, when the radical Neo-Advaita team says there is nothing and that's the ultimate, that is a belief. Again, as you say, this is not real. See, you say this is not real, that is not real, Andrew is not real, Ilangho is not real, the room is not real, laptop is not real, internet is not real. I said your belief finally is also not real. How will you defend that? You can't defend that. Nobody
Yeah,
can defend
even
it.
the awakened mind is also part of the dream.
Yes.
All awakened experience is also part of the dream, is also illusory. And by illusory, it's not real or unreal.
Why do
It's
you say
just
this?
seemingly
Why not?
apparent.
Yeah, but why not we say, see, the English language, when you use that word apparent, especially the British way of using the, rarely, unrare, like uncommonly common, and the word apparently in English, a very, very, very tricky term. Why not we say this is real? This is what we're going to live and die with. Why do you say this is unreal?
Well,
This
first
is
of
real.
all, the
My
realness
attack.
of it causes you to suffer. Not
No, but
cause and effect
post,
way, but
I
it's linked.
understand, but post enlightenment, at least the speakers can change that, isn't it? Even when they talk about illusion, this guy seeker is already in a problem. For him, even the real is suffering, and he thinks about those who have not had any awakening. When somebody talks about nothing, illusion, this is real, isn't it? The only thing is, in enlightenment, the claiming of the ownership of this falls away, and the reality is seen as it is. But everything is real. Why do we say it is not real?
So on the one hand, it seems like there are levels of imaginary or real, and on the other hand, it's all equally imaginary.
How do you know?
So
How do you know? Maybe this is the only reality you will ever come across. Maybe
probably,
there was
yeah,
there
all
was there
realities are
was.
virtual. Yeah.
See, once upon a there was, I know somebody said, the stars you see and the moon you see is actually, some projector being projected on top of you. How do you know all the
Yeah,
governments have
yeah,
got together? You've never been to the moon. How do you know they've gone to?
yeah.
Everything is again a belief system. Now
Right.
the only thing which we can do as human beings is, those of you who are enlightened, can show the way to us how to get out of suffering. That's it. Period. That's the only target for the rifle shooter. For the seeker, he wants to identify the me and kill the me. How to do it? Very simple. Are there techniques? See, for example, in me, it happened spontaneously. Then I learned the Vedic teaching helped me to a certain degree. Lisa Keynes came in 2014 and gave me a U-turn for this nothing theory, philosophy of Tony Parsons. She gave it a different twist, a very personal twist, which made me understand the depth of the me and how things happen. And recently I've been doing, as I said, Byron Katie's work, which homes in on the me to remove the me. It's a method given only for the me. It looks like a psychological worksheet, very simple, very kindergarten stuff, but that
Well,
goes into the depth.
one of the funny, it's almost mean. I don't mean to be mean to the seeker, but sometimes you gotta slap it a little bit. So
Zen,
when it
yeah,
says things like, "Well, I have a method and I've been doing this for years," I almost want to say, "Well, did it work?
it's
Did it work?"
working, it's working. We don't know.
Well, I have a method and I know it works. Did it work?
As I've been telling to
But it
some of
can
my
be
friends,
helpful to remove certain layers of
yeah,
suffering. Yeah.
as I've been telling to some of my spiritual friends, the only way to get a real, a consensus statement on this enlightenment part, the days of Vedas have gone, the days of Ramana Maharishi, Nisargadatta, Lahiri, all your, now this is an era of the internet, and you don't require anything. Gather the data of all the enlightened people, the seekers, put it up in a worksheet, Excel sheet, start working on it. Down the line, something will happen. There will be some amount of accountability and some sort of method in how people, talk about. See, the only thing I'm concerned about, I understand the no one talking to nobody. I understand that very clearly. I've got my grounding. But a lot of people, I believe, especially teenagers, when they hear this message, and I'm just giving you a word of caution as you keep teaching, though you'll have a big disclaimer on your website saying, I am not responsible for what is going to happen. Or suppose I come on a one-on-one session with you, I pay money and I commit suicide 1 week later, and my people can sue you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, it's a point. And I know personally a lot of established speakers way beyond. They have got into problems and they have to change their teaching from no one
Yeah.
because I think in the video you saw, I gave the example of seeker is actually a psychological cripple wanting a
Yeah.
imaginary hand on something, method or something, and you knock off that staff of that psychological cripple who's a seeker. That fellow crashes, the guy or the girl crashes. There's nothing left, hopelessness, and they say, okay, let me do something. So when teachers speak about nothing, they may drive a seeker toward insanity if they don't have
Yeah.
support
It's a
system. If they
dangerous
don't,
business.
if
Yeah.
they don't see, fortunately for me, right throughout my life as a spiritual seeker, I had spiritual friends who were ahead of me, and whenever I had a problem, I can just call them up. And I had,
Mhm.
now it's very different, but even earlier I had been blessed to, touch base with certain speakers or enlightened
Yeah.
people to clarify. But if they're just going to hear you on a retreat or on a YouTube, and they're alone by themselves with their own suffering, and even that small iota of hope they have is removed by this nothing teaching, I think that has to be addressed also by the speakers. Because down the line,
Yeah.
you may also end up with a professional legal suit.
Yeah. Right.
I have a friend who told me like a lot of speakers have got into this sort of problem. That there have been legal
Yeah.
issues of
And
people.
in that way, it takes a type of courage as well to do this. It's kind of like,
Correct.
I think as a doctor, you might actually be able to understand it better, because it's kind of like, imagine if somebody was overwhelmed with how sensitive they are. They wouldn't be able to perform brain surgery or heart surgery or any type of surgery. They'd be too squeamish. Before awakening, I wouldn't be the type of person to be able to do that type of thing. But after awakening, I could. There's a steadiness. There's a detached. There's like a increase
Yeah,
and
yeah.
decrease in
No, the very,
sensitivity in a
yeah.
functional way.
You become totally autonomous. Post enlightenment, it's a different ballgame. But because you are comparing medical doctors to, see, for a doctor, when a patient comes, there is a profession. You remove the suffering. But in non-duality speaker, when a seeker comes, the suffering should go. It should not increase.
Yeah, yeah, I would
But
say so.
yeah, though the
Yeah,
intention of all the speakers is to remove the suffering, but when they keep
right,
on swinging around, there's nothing to be done, nothing to be done. Is it going to help or
right.
not? We have to be
Exactly,
careful about that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, the goal is to end suffering. So if a speaker is, by the end of the session, if you're suffering more, then something went wrong, probably on
no,
the
they are.
speaker's end. Not that they made a mistake, but yeah,
I
like you
know.
said, you can polish up the interaction in a way, because that is the goal, to end suffering. So if you're, from the seeker's perspective, if you're making progress towards ending suffering, then it should be ending bit by bit.
Correct.
And to an extent, there's a truth to that. I think, my goal is to reduce suffering on the other end of the call every time I'm on the call. Even though there's no doer or no self, there's still, like you said, there's a remnant of functioning. Just like we can say, do you want popcorn with the movie? What time does the movie start? Is the babysitter here? What time does the babysitter? Those types of things, they're very ordinary levels of knowing, very ordinary, pragmatic. It's the end of philosophy. Philosophy only emerges when there's a seeming problem, and there never is a problem. But when there's a seeming problem, philosophy emerges to do something about it. That's just how the neocortical activity of the languaging software works. It wants to have agency to end the suffering, just like it does every other way. And yet, this is a more permanent end of suffering, an end of self. And so, because of that more permanent shift, that's the part that at least doesn't yet have an obvious method. And again, if you're even thinking in terms of a method, you're going out looking for something in time and space that you can do about it as a self. So it kind of creates this loop that's still over here, even though the programming of the brain, let's say, is this, that conscious self is only this. So much more, there's energy, there's information occurring and being processed that isn't even available to the conscious mind. And the conscious mind thinks that it thinks. The conscious mind thinks it's the thinker. It thinks it's the cause of the thoughts, but it's not. And so
Exactly.
because it thinks that it thinks and thinks that it's the thinker, it therefore assumes wrongly that it exists the same way that this
Exactly.
exists. But this exists a hell of a lot more than a bug within the languaging program. And it's seemingly unnatural, all of civilization, seemingly unnatural, because it's born out of the loss of the natural state. So if everybody on Earth suddenly went through this shift, civilization may or may not crumble to the ground. So there's a functioning on a mass level too, and it's hard to say what should be. What should be is what is what should be. And yet, from the seeker's perspective, essentially the world is upside down. And so they see the world upside down and they go, this place is hell. This is horrible. Everything's upside down. This is, oh my God. And then upon awakening, it's flipped right side up. Oh, wow. It's always been paradise. How did I not see this? It's right here. How did I not see this for so long? I'm an intelligent man. How did I not see this? This is crazy.
Change of perspective.
Yeah, it's a non-dual permanent shift in perspective. It's at least as permanent as the health of the brain.
Do you have fear in you still, which you used to have earlier as a?
Yeah, there's still some fear. There's just not fear for things like death, for example. So, and I don't know if I would call it fear. There's just a want, if you will. For example, I want to get my book written and have it be available online before I get hit by a bus. But once the book is written, I'm okay if a bus hits me. Once the message is out there, for whatever reason, once my message is out there, it's okay. I've fulfilled my my life mission, if you will. If I live another 80 years, that's a miracle, because every day I wake up, it's almost like being a 112-year-old. Every day I wake up and I go, wow, how is the body still alive? This is crazy. And some people in certain states might have this awareness of, wow, how is it possible that I'm conscious right now? It seems to be that I'm this body. How am I conscious right now? This is crazy. This is a miracle. Yet from this perspective, every day is extra. Every day I wake up, I go, wow, body's still alive, and everything's still clear and calm and liberated, and the body's still going on. How is this possible? And yet I'm totally comfortable in a way once I get the message out, which I probably already have. So in that sense, yeah, I'm not afraid of death, for example, because I've already died, right? To die before you die is, to die when you die. It's hard to die because it's the relinquishing of identity. It's the relinquishing of the functioning me. And yet, if that's already occurred, then there's really no fear of death at that point. So
fear of suffering.
Yeah, there's no suffering. So it's you can't fear something that you know that you realize doesn't exist. It's like being afraid of a unicorn biting you every time you turn the corner. Every time you come around the corner, is there a unicorn gonna bite me? No, I know that I realize that there's no unicorn gonna bite me. It's like that. Everything, from the seeker's perspective, everything hurts. Everything can get you. Everything can bite you, and it really can, And from the awakened perspective, yeah, there's no you to be bitten. The way I think the Tao Te Ching might have a few gems in it as well. It's kind of like, how are you gonna get me? I'm not here. I'm empty space, if you will. You can wave your sword through empty space and it's not going to cut it in half. It's not going to threaten its existence. The only thing that exists eternally is non-existence. So people ask me, does God exist? God is non-existence itself. And it's not a person. It's a vast, spacious, impersonal, clear, empty awareness, or an awareing. It's not a thing. It's not a concept. It's not awareness. It's just a clear, empty awareing.
Verb. It's a verb. And Andrew, you had said that your awakening coincided with the Kundalini awakening. I mean, you knew about the
No.
Kundalini
Well,
before? Or you knew about the Kundalini
yeah,
before?
like I had read about it, when I was about 16. It kind of was came online, if you will. I could kind of feel that it was active on some level, even if it was subtle. There was some level of activity that, my eye color changed. I started experiencing some very subtle city, psychic type functioning, or interesting little glimpses of telepathy and things like that. Nothing particularly useful, just enough for you to go, oh, this is a thing, there's something to all that. It's subtle and it's not particularly powerfully helpful or anything. It's just silly little, but it gives you, the mind at least, evidence that there's some other layer, this non-local layer that can be across distances. Time and space are not affected at all. Doesn't Time and space don't affect it, rather, at all. And so even things like Shaktipat, for example, if you had that same teacher doing it to you over Zoom, you'd probably still have the experience. I don't think you'd have to be in the room for that to happen. Yeah. And so in that sense, I do feel, and I might get a lot of flack for this from other non-dual speakers in that community. They might tear me to shreds for this, but again, there's a type of courage that needs to speak itself based on our own lived experiences, even though, yeah, even though it's all a dream. There does seem to be a subtle transmission of Shakti, a very subtle Shaktipat occurring via the voice here. For me, the Kundalini kind of got stuck at the throat chakra, if you will. And we talked, and I know you are interested in the correlations between the energetic layer and the physiology. And not only is there a nerve plexus at each one of these, there's also a corresponding change in the direction of the spine.
The autonomic nervous plexus.
Yeah. So there is a subtle transmission of Shakti. For example, this was probably my least active chakra. It was almost like a blockage. Yeah, there was a blockage for a very long time. And then I would lay down at night when I was about 16, and I'd be doing these chakra-based meditations to raise the energy, and it would almost feel like it was stuck, and then I'd give up. And then I'd experience what I can only describe as a brow strobe effect, where it feels like someone took a pillow made of light and just bashed you in the face with this bright burst of light. And that's because it got stuck at that level, and then all at once, as a lump, it's almost like a hose with a kink in it right there. And as it passes, a big lump of energy all at once finally goes up to the next chakra, and you experience this. It's like being punched in the face with light. And so as I was going to bed, that would happen. And so, and another example of the corresponding physiology for things like that is I have an underactive thyroid. So my thyroid is larger. So the body is compensating physically as well. So there are corresponding, there's correlation, but not causation.
Correct.
And so I could probably give techniques on how to meditate with the chakras energetically and how to do Kachari Mudra. And yet it would probably only potentially lead to glimpses that may or may not increase or decrease the seeker's frustration or suffering. So it might just be more helpful to just keep bashing one's head off of the radical non-duality until somehow it clicks. That's the feeling I get. The self-inquiry seems to be the most helpful. And, the seeker is looking for the true self. The seeker is looking for Buddha nature. The seeker is looking for the heart of Shiva, and yet what they're really looking for is their own absence. It's not a presence as much as an absence. It's not something you get as it is something that's taken away from you. That's why neti neti is so potently helpful.
I have a derivative. The liberation is not grandiose. It's the liberation from the me.
Yeah.
You are liberating yourself from yourself. The false self.
Very
that
ordinary.
Is the liberation. That is the liberation. Yeah. The liberation of your human self.
I mean, it's not
into
something
this.
you do. Yeah, liberation isn't something you do, as it is something that happens to you. In the same way that if I took something away, that's something that happened to that thing that I'm taking away from. So
No,
it's not something added. It's a series of things that are subtracted. You're basically deleting your delusions. You're
no,
going through the lines of
yeah.
programming and deleting the syntax errors.
You're talking about the methods. I'm talking about the end point. Liberation is the liberation from the me energy
Yeah.
inside you. You're liberating
It's
yourself from
it's
your
it's
own.
the liberation from the identification of the me. So it's
Right.
not that the functioning me goes away, or else I'd be in a coma right now
No, no, no.
or something, or I'd just be staring at the wall. Which is what Zen seekers try to do. They just sit there motionless and stare at the wall, for 10 years, and it probably won't work. But their mind starts projecting movies and things onto the wall because the mind gets bored. And that's what Zen is. It's like a very intentional trying to bore the mind. So the mind is interested by things that probably won't lead to liberation. And it doesn't like talking about the types of things that may lead to liberation. So it has a built-in self-protection mechanism, just like the body does, because it wants to keep going, and that keeping going is what's causing the suffering, and that it finally stops. And when it stops, there's no more inertia, there's no momentum. It's like a train barreling down full blast, and then just no inertia, no momentum, just full stop.
Are you writing a book?
Yeah.
Oh, good. On Advaita, Enlightenment?
Well, I'm writing a book. I know the people in the radical non-duality community some of them would prefer if I didn't include all these energetic, seemingly woo-woo, interesting to the seeker type things, because it can misguide. It can give the seeker the wrong idea. It can give the seeker the idea that these things are important and somehow are necessary to then be liberated, and that's not true. But it's what occurred here. And so, as strange and crazy and misguided as it feels for me to talk about it, I also have this urge to be radically honest, and even to experience potential ridicule and less people to talk to about this thing. It almost doesn't matter to me at all. All I'm doing is a very radically honest sharing of experience, even though there's no time and space and yada yada. I get bored of that too sometimes, the being stuck in only that. Even I get bored of that. Even other sages get bored of that. And it's not necessarily boredom. It's just that why limit the conversation to any one little tunnel, any one little rabbit hole? So
I have seen in my seeking that the top level masters like Nisargadatta or Ramana. You've heard about Ramana Maharishi, or
oh
I'm
yeah.
just quoting a few examples, or they always had certain type of a technique to help the seeker. Ultimately, they landed with nothing. Everybody landed in Rome. They said there was nothing. There was nobody speaking to no one. There is no guru, there is no disciple. But they started out with certain lessons, how to guide the speaker slowly towards the target. Whereas now it appears the radical New Advaita is, immediately take you and put you in Rome. And most of the time, seekers may be bewildered as to what's happening around, because they are living in a causal world, in a timed space world where they have to put their laptop on to get to a Zoom
Yeah.
meeting, and then they ask
Right.
the speaker like, "Who are you?" And the speaker says, "I'm nobody."
Yeah.
And
And
there is a big.
that's why Buddhism sometimes can take a misstep. It's like the fundamental essence of Advaita and Buddhism and the no self is potently helpful, but there's also flowery, poetic, grandiose, blown out of the water things that are from the dualistic seeking mind. So, for example, in Buddhism, they talk about cause and effect, and that's not really the case. It's extremely acausal.
But actually, one of the oldest radical Advaita person would be Buddha, who said, events happen
Yeah,
for nobody. But he had
yeah.
a method. I mean, even he had a method to sort of
Well,
guide the
that's
seeker,
what we're
right?
told. That's
not
what
so,
we're
is it?
told 2,500 years later. That's what we're told. That's the story we're fed. Who knows?
We don't know.
Most likely, probably, I would, if I had to guess, I would say Buddha and Socrates and Jesus were probably speaking in a manner that was very similar to somebody like Tony Parsons. Like, I don't think Tony Parsons, invented that perspective. He put it in a very clear, expressible, direct manner, an uncompromisingly, radically, don't give the seeker an inch way. And that is actually very potently helpful. As frustrating as it is, and he will even admit, if he pandered to the self, he'd have a much wider following. And the way he would put it is, the nothing is hiding in plain sight as everything. In other words, there's really nothing here. What is real is nothing. That's real. That's the Tao, the self-reliant Tao, the
But
sourceless source, the
yeah,
acausal.
but for the seeker who's maybe interested in knowing who am I, he is finally interested in cutting off his or her suffering. How will that message help in the cutting of the suffering? Even Tony Parsons' message. I come there and he talks about the nothing and the everything. How is that? Is that going to reduce my suffering?
Well, it may or may not somehow over time induce the shift. So a speaker would be a liar if they said that they expect you to get nothing from this. They wouldn't be doing this if they truly expected absolutely no progress from the seeker.
But
They
most of them
wouldn't be
say,
wasting their time.
no,
They
no, no.
say that, but they wouldn't be
See,
wasting their
I have
time.
like I have asked them directly, and they have said nothing. There is
Yeah,
nothing to tell you. There is. Then why
yeah,
are you talking just like that? I'm just talking.
yeah,
And what is the point
yeah,
in coming to your meeting? Nobody asked you to come.
yeah.
But then I asked them, there is an invitation. There is an invitation, but it is not a suggestion. It's more of semantic discussions. See, there is an invitation on the web saying it's available and you're coming to a talk, and a seeker asks, like, I mean, what is the purpose? I mean, you say there's nothing, but then what is the purpose of me coming to the talk? Nothing.
There's no
Why are you?
purpose. Yeah.
Why are you talking? I don't know. Who's
I'm
talking?
not
Nobody.
talking. Yeah, I'm not
Who's
talking.
talking?
Speech is
Nobody.
occurring.
Speech is occurring. Ah, the thing is, we can have a very open discussion, but then they generally have the upper hand. They can cut off a discussion whenever they want, or they can
Yeah,
switch off their. So we really don't have an open forum to talk to them in the sense really
right.
plow. Say, for example, I have about 60 minutes to talk to you, and I can go in and ask you. There we have 5 to 10 minutes, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then this thing doesn't go anywhere. They say that's it. That's the message. There is nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
But how is that going to translate into ending my suffering or the suffering of the seekers around? There is no explanation on that.
It's being spoken very, very clearly, and yet it can't be heard very clearly. And so there is no wisdom. There is no wisdom. However, the wisest thing you can do is clearly hear it. So it's kind of like taking advice from sages. The sage speaking, that's not wisdom. Giving good advice, that's not wisdom. Taking and applying good advice, that's wisdom. And yet there's no
But
wisdom.
yeah, but here the speaker says I'm giving you nothing.
Yeah.
That's the message being
Yeah.
said. There is
And
nothing
you
to,
already are and have. It's not that you are getting nothing. Nothing is already the case. Liberation is already the case. So really what's happening is your delusions are being slowly stolen from you. Bit by bit by bit, like little nibbles. And it either sinks in and saturates or it doesn't. And from the speaker's perspective, they don't care what happens. What next? Krishnamurti, the same thing. I don't mind what happens tonight. My big secret is I don't mind what happens. Like, yeah, I don't care. Whatever happens is fine. Yeah. And yet there's a functioning. The ego wants to say there's a purpose for this. There's a reason we're doing this. But it's just happening. It's just acausal. There's no cause effect relationship. There's no causation. There's no time. And even if you were to look at the different sages and put them in a spreadsheet, you may or may not find what you're looking for, because there's really nothing can be mimicked, or it's nothing about the personal lifestyle that necessarily led to it.
Another thing, Andrew, I wanted to ask you was, we say it's an acausal universe in terms of physics and in terms of spirituality. But
Yeah.
when I plant a mango seed, I get a mango tree. When I plant a rose seed, I get a rose flower, a rose plant.
But you don't grow the tree. The tree just grows.
I don't grow. But at the end of
You
the
don't
week,
make the sun shine. You don't make it rain. The rain just happens. The sun just happens. The growth just happens. The blooming and the ripening and the falling of the mango just happens. You smelling the flower just happens.
okay, another question, though it may appear stupid. Now, Andrew has got a home, right? And every day, Andrew goes back to his house. He doesn't go to the next house.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were like a wandering, animal, even an animal, they have caves and they have nests. You can just lie down, but you go back to your place. I have been asking this. You have a Facebook account, you have a voter ID, you have an identification card, and all those things keep the label of you as a separate person. Those things are accepted as normal. Only when spirituality discussion comes, then nothing happens. Otherwise, there is a Facebook ID, Andrew. There is a voter ID. There is everything separate. You have a separate house, separate everything, car, etc., etc., etc. Those things are, come into a certain segment of individuality. But then again, the answer is everything happens. I think there is a discordance. What I'm telling is, I'm not telling they are not authentic. I'm not telling they are enlightened or not enlightened or awakened or they have come back. I'm just telling your teaching has to be more rehearsed or more researched into delivery, where in a time cost world, it can also give meaning. You can explain it like the Vedas did it. In the Vedas, the master speaks to the disciple, says, I am separate, you are separate, and then he keeps on doing the neti theory, nothing, 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 nothing. At the end of the chapter, then the disciple asks, what is it? Then he says, yes, I am not there, you are not there, and there is only this.
Yeah.
There is a method where the child is taken up slowly. You don't teach a child Shakespeare initially. That is maybe one of the methods to a child prodigy.
I know what you mean. It's like skipping to the end. Yeah.
Going there and like you're stuck.
And yet that's what the seeker wants. They want to skip to the end, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but I'm not able to do it. See, for example, you give a steak to a newborn child, you have to give breast milk. You can't give a steak to a newborn child.
Yeah.
You have to teach ABCD. You can't teach Shakespeare.
So this radical non-duality message is probably for people that are wanting to.
Very few people. Maybe 1% of the 100% of seekers.
Yeah.
Suppose there are millions of seekers. You are only talking to that 1%. What about the rest 99%?
Yes.
So my request always to speakers have been, like even Jesus went to the desert for 40 days for meditation, and then he came out to the Sermon on the Mount. Should enlightened people also, sort of go for a retreat themselves, that they get some sort of method where we can understand.
Go into the forest.
No, I'm just
go into the forest and absorb the energy.
Metaphor.
Different maybe, reset methods.
See, for example, I remember Adya Shanti talking about this enlightenment. I mean, one of the modern speakers who gave me, I think sitting in front of, he was a Buddhist. For years he has been meditating. And one day he keeps the Buddha statue and he says there were at a time 1,000 downloads into his brain.
Yeah.
He talked in terms of software. These were his original words.
Yeah.
1,000 downloads happening. So speakers who are already blessed, if they can, maybe, they just come and talk and go. Maybe they are doing their homework or not, I don't know. Like as seekers, we are doing our homework. Are the speakers and teachers doing theirs? So that they can upgrade themselves to the next level. Instead of post 20% 1995, there has been no upgrade. There is no upgrade 1996, 2000.
Right.
See, the iPhone has it, the laptop has it, the Microsoft has it.
Right.
2020, 2021, 2022. But this has been sort of static.
Yeah.
So can we, search something and go for the next step, which can help more people to get enlightened faster? I mean,
I like that idea. Yeah. I like that idea. And I also like the idea of, like you were saying, the seeker guiding the conversation sometimes and having the upper hand. I think that's interesting and important too. I think it's like you were saying recently, if there's a meeting and it's only sages,
Oh, yes.
There's something missing. There's something missing in the equation of the evolution of how this can be expressed. Another way to put it would be, if you are somebody who has 3 PhDs and you're towards the end of your life, you're going to have a very hard time connecting with the freshmen.
Correct. Exactly.
There's like so big of a gap that you're going to need a TA to be the middle ground to say, no, what he meant was this. And I go, oh, okay. Because you can't even water it down enough for them to understand. So there's
You
like
don't have the ground experience.
a middleman almost is
You
needed.
don't have the
like
ground experience.
TA.
It's like you're a 5-star general sitting in an air-conditioned suit somewhere in Washington, and your soldier is fighting in Vietnam.
Yeah.
You won't know anything about what that guy is suffering.
Yeah, there's a disconnect. It's like somebody who's born wealthy can't understand what poverty is like, but somebody who comes from abject poverty that then becomes wealthy, they can understand every step of the way because they've experienced every step of the way and they know what that is like. Yeah.
And another thing is, whenever any speaker generally goes there for an hour or two and there's an open session, they all have free open sessions, all the speakers, once a week or twice a week. They have a 60-minute time and there are about 10 people talking there. So Seeker 1 speaks for 5 minutes, Seeker 2, 5 minutes, Seeker 3, 15 minutes.
The same question, it's very superficial.
The same peripheral. So what I would suggest is allow one seeker who you think has got some intention and intensity to go deep into you, start digging into you. The same seeker asking the questions again and again. You can't repeat the same thing again to me. So I keep on digging in, then probably between us, something else comes out. It has happened a lot when there has been a continuous discussion one-on-one.
Yeah, I like that idea. Just being almost interrogated for 4 hours might be very fruitful.
Minimum 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 to 4 hours. Yeah.
With single people. Yeah, that may bring out something we don't know.
Yeah, I'm open to that idea. I like that idea.
See, ultimately, I was speaking to one of the biggest spiritual speakers of all time, and I told, what does Biden want? What does Putin want? What does the UK Prime Minister want? What does the Indian Prime Minister want? What does the Australian Prime Minister want? What does the European Union? What do they want ultimately? End of suffering.
Yeah.
Everybody does what they do. The Facebook, the Google.
Yeah, look at Trump, for example.
Elon Musk sending rockets to Mars, doing everything, digging tunnels. Ultimately, it's for a very simple equation, end of suffering. Now, in spirituality, you've got the formula somewhere. The Einsteinian E is equal to mc squared of physics is somewhere in spirituality. Now, if you can get your heads together rather than each of you on your own, for 25 years saying nothing is speaking to nothing, I can understand this if I'm a 5-year-old kid. When I'm 5 years old and if they teach me in a class, 1 year, only one class of 1 hour session, this is what the teaching is. I don't require 25 years to get that into my brains. It's done. Next, go to the next step. How do we go about ending suffering to the humanity? Now, spirituality is in a very good time now with the internet. We can, so many people can get across. There is so much of R&D happening, research and data. So in one of the speakers' talks, I was telling them, in medicine, we have International Society for Hypertension. We have an International Society for Diabetes. They get their acts together and there is an international consensus statement for hypertension. You have to treat only like this. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Every year there is a revision. Why can't you do that for spirituality? Buddha couldn't do it. Maybe, Ramana Maharshi couldn't do it. Now this is scientific world. Everything.
Well, it kind of happened in the East, in Asia. They had, all these different schools that were influencing each other and evolving and co-evolving. So in that way, I see Advaita and Buddhism as having co-evolved. Almost all of Eastern religions co-evolved and debated and honed and refined.
Correct.
And so this is always going on. This is always going on. What you're saying and looking for
but presently there is no interaction in the modern world where communication is the ultimate. With the internet, no speakers are speaking between themselves except for conferences.
Yeah, they're kind of on their own island. I know what you mean. And it's funny too, because there's a paradox there. Every non-dual speaker is trying to have their own flavor, their own message, which is funny, right? A non-individual is trying to maintain a type of individuality. It's a paradox. It's interesting. It's not wrong. I'm not saying we should stop doing that. It's just an interesting paradox that even I don't want to be too influenced by other non-dual speakers, so I try not to listen too much to their speaks, their videos and things, because I don't want it to change the way I'm expressing it automatically. And yet they have a few gems in there that might, accidentally influence me, for example. So when you say, oh, have you heard of this speaker? Have you heard of that? It's like, yeah, like part of me wants to go watch every YouTube video that's ever been, but I know it would influence my message. So I kind of want to solidify my message first and maintain that individuality, which is hilarious. A non-dual speaker trying to maintain individuality. There's a hilarious joke of a paradox there somewhere.
See, like we have in science, we had a Newton. We had a Newton in
Yeah.
1600s, but it was not just he came and did everything. A lot of people did a lot of work before that, from Galileo to Copernicus. Then there was centuries of a lot of geniuses work, and then we had an Einstein, we had a Maxwell, a Faraday, and an Einstein, Bohr, and so many people. And somebody came and gave that spark of E equal to mc squared, and these big equations, which are very simple actually. If you look at the
and
basics
if
of
Newton hadn't come, Einstein wouldn't have been able to do that.
it's all connected. It's all. But then I believe
exactly.
in spirituality, with so much of access to internet communication. Now this is a world of plenty. We are having a problem because we are having a world of plenty. It is not a world of poverty. Because there is a famine in Ethiopia doesn't mean there is no food there. There is food. You're not distributed it properly.
It's so not that there's not enough food on the earth. It's that it's not being distributed.
It's the basic animal instinct working. So I've been telling, in the human spectrum, we have the worst animal in the planet, the human being, the worst animal, who can press a button and demolish the earth. And then you have in the other extreme the godlike personalities, the Buddha, Socrates, all these big saint like Vedic rishis, or even the teachers.
And they're very ordinary, right? Like you said recently, it's like when you're talking to Lisa Cairns, you're talking to a rishi. You're talking to it's going to sound arrogant, but from my perspective, you're talking to a Buddha right now. You're talking to a sage. Yeah.
So I have always felt teachers are
that these teachers are put up on this really high, extraordinary pedestal. Jesus, Buddha, Socrates, they were very ordinary people. What happened to them was very ordinary. It wasn't this blown out of the water, grandiose poetics we hear about. It was a very ordinary experience. It's just like this mind, It's just like this mind. And even though there is no mind, and mind only occurs in a dream, therefore the awakened state, which is a state of mind, is still part of the dream. And yet you can finally relax and enjoy.
But still they are taken as special. These people are taken as special because they are sort of in a cosmic interface between the human life and the cosmos.
Yes, and I've always identified it as an interface, especially now. Yeah, so use me.
And therefore, when the spectrum is so vast from an animal to the godlike quality, spirituality can help humanity go towards that. If we catch on to some method, if we catch on to some technique, where school children can be taught this.
I'm very interested in like neuroscience and the correlations, what happens in the brain with awakening and things like that. I'm very interested in that type of research and that type of I would definitely participate in that type of thing if the opportunity presented itself. For example, I know a lot of non-dual speakers would shy away from that and say it's misguided and it's silly and it's coming from the dualistic mind, and yet I do see a value to that. I agree with you.
I have been basically a life researcher, and I wrote a paper 10 years ago on life research where I foresee like a lot of, Ray Kurzweil, one of the Google artificial intelligence advisors, Ray Kurzweil. So these people are predicted maybe in a decade, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, or 100 years from now, if we don't have a World War III, if this planet does not face a World War III, artificial intelligence will map everything, the human brain, etc., and they will come. I think as a spiritual seeker, a global enlightenment can happen, provided things go in the proper way. Neuroscience develops, artificial intelligence develops, the computers develop. A lot of criticism that you can never match human consciousness. I always used to think the human consciousness probably is energy, probably is data, probably is information. And that can be manipulated for enlightenment.
Yeah, it's a pattern. It's not the data points as much as it is the pattern and the interrelation of those data points.
Whatever. Yeah. And if Ilangho has got a certain configuration as a seeker and Andrew has certain configuration, it has changed, then convert Ilangho configuration to Andrew. That's it. It's like matching patterns or whatever. Down the line, that may happen, but till at that point in time, we'll have to rely on speakers and teachers to teach us how to get enlightened.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
That's how life goes. The mystery goes.
Yeah. Upon awakening, the mystery finally begins.
I
And
think
yet
so.
all the riddles are solved, all the paradoxes are solved. There's no riddles now.
That's you hit the jackpot.
Kind of, in a way, but it's not there's no, it's almost like there's, if I were a seeker, there would be a tremendous amount of excitement, and there would be a tremendous amount of, then there's the blues, and it's like there's this up and down, but awakening is just kind of being reset to zero. Zero is neither positive nor negative, neither left nor right, neither up nor down, and
Peace.
technically it's
More peace.
representing non-existence. It's representing absence.
This room is better than the other one on FM radio. You gave a interview, right?
Yeah.
That room looked very
Nothing
mystic,
FM.
very mystical. The black background and you understand?
Say it again.
That that room was a bit black, dark, and the background during the FM.
Yeah, I'm in a library right now in the study room.
Oh, okay.
And I'm recording this on my phone. That's why the video is more clear. I was on a crappy laptop with a very blurry camera.
Yeah, the camera was very blurry. I wanted to tell you that. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that. I was in a pinch. I didn't have an option. Okay. But now I paid
this is
for
very clear. Very clear.
The pro Zoom level or whatever, so I can record this, for example, on my phone. I have a tripod now, which is what's occurring. Oh. But yeah, I noticed that too. That was one of the few things in that interview that I thought could have gone better, is if I had a better quality camera. But I was in a pinch. It's okay though.
No, it was very nice, beautiful. I mean, the thing was dark and a sage talking.
Two sages, technically.
Yeah, correct. Emerson.
Yeah, I love Emerson, man. He's great.
I'm a very sweet guy.
And I love you. You're great.
Thank you. I love you too.
And I appreciate what you're doing, even though there's no doer and there's no you.
Yeah. Listening to speakers like you, talking to you, helps us seekers. It keeps clarifying.
Yeah, it shows that there's the possibility that there's something to this, that it could maybe happen, to anyone. But I think you're right that there are, we haven't brought this up in this conversation, but you said things like someone is more likely to wake up if there's certain criteria present, or at least it's reflected in the data, as it were, that you're collecting, that a sage tends to be someone who is suffering a great deal, more than average, more intelligent than average. And I think those two things go together. I think a more intelligent person's going to suffer more because of that.
Yeah. There were four, as I told you, there were 4 criteria for enlightenment in that video I sent. 4 points for enlightenment.
So suffering a great deal.
No. The definition of enlightenment was no doership, no separation, no suffering, and bliss. But who are the people who can get enlightened? I had a separate 4. That was extreme suffering, where you have no human relationship. You can't go to a friend.
Or at least you feel like you're separate from them. It's a very strong sense of separation. More than average.
You become an island. Extreme suffering, you become an island. There is no
at least perceived isolation.
Perceived. You can't go to a friend. You can't go to a psychologist. You're totally shut off.
It feels like you can't go to them.
Feels
and if they wouldn't understand, etc.
Yeah. And the third thing was you need to have an above average intelligence. And as you said, that above average intelligence maybe equates with more of suffering, mental
Yeah,
And the
disconnected.
and the last one is, this is except for spontaneous enlightenment. Last one is you go for a method. You go for a technique. You either go to a psychologist, or you go to a guru, you go to a teacher, a
You're
radical,
trying something. Yeah,
trying
you're
some
seeking
method.
everything. Yeah,
Everything is shut
right.
down. Your back is against the wall. You seek something, boom.
So in other words, even though after awakening we might say there's no method, we tried a
There
bunch
was a
of
method.
methods. We tried everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
I
was
know
a
what you mean.
method. There was something.
We were ravenously seeking. Yeah.
And I think it's a great subject to talk about.
Yeah.
The ultimate. And very few people talk about this. And the people who hear you talking about this, even in your home, they think you're nuts.
Yeah. Or at least they know that there's a disconnect of some kind. Yeah. Or another way I might put it is in your so-called real life, in other words, your physical, the people you meet in actual, in person, if you will, not online. How many sages have you met in your entire life that
Real
you're
life,
aware of?
yeah, Mataji, my first 1990, Sri Mataji Nirmala Devi, who gave me the Kundali transfer, just like that. 1 year. She was number one. I couldn't meet Osho. Osho was one of my greatest influence. I couldn't meet Osho. Then next was Lisa Keynes.
Did you meet her
Lisa,
in physical, in
India,
person?
India. When she
Okay.
came to India, 2016, 2017, I met her, 2019, twice. Then I met Roger Castillo, her teacher, Roger Castillo. You know about him, right?
Who's that again?
Roger, R-O-G-E-R, Roger Castillo. He's Australian, Maltese born, now in Australia.
Doesn't ring a
Roger,
bell.
Roger Castillo's Lisa Keynes teacher.
Oh,
Roger Castillo's teacher was Ramesh Balsekar. You know about Ramesh Balsekar? No.
I'm not sure.
Okay. You know Nisargadatta Maharaj?
Yeah, of
Nisargadatta
course.
Maharaj's disciple was Ramesh Balsekar, direct.
Ah, gotcha.
Ramesh Balsekar was a British banker, Indian, who settled in Mumbai, and Roger Castillo and Lisa Kent used to go to him for teaching.
Okay.
Roger Castillo became his disciple, and Ramesh Balsekar told Lisa Kent to go to Roger Castillo. So she went with him to Australia, stayed with him for 3 years, got enlightened. So I met Lisa Keynes, I met Roger Castillo. Then I met Naho Owada a year before. She's a Japanese teacher, you know her, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar. I haven't watched her videos yet, but I'm familiar with her being
I met
on
her.
Nothing FM and things.
I
Yeah.
met her. I met her in India. Then I met Karl Renz. He's a German. Karl Renz, K-R-L-R-E-N-Z. He's a German. 6 months he's in Germany. 6 months he's in India. So last year I was there for about 2 weeks with him, and his teaching is very radical. So if you go to satsang in the morning, generally, how will you wish your satsang? You will say it's good morning, right? He will start with bad morning, and
Yeah.
his teaching is totally trying to destroy the ego. So these are the
Right.
four people I have met in person.
Yeah,
And
sometimes I like to pretend to be the villain because it's like you said, you're looking for an assassin to come, you're trying to hire an assassin to kill the ego.
correct,
Well,
exactly,
here I am,
exactly.
the villain. You're not going to like the way it feels, type of thing. I'm doing it out of love, right? We're all, even though there's no one here and there's no doer, it's happening out of love to try to end the suffering. And in that way, it might be unpleasant to bump up against that because of that self-protection mechanism. So
You have listened
these
to Lisa Keynes, right?
sages,
Yeah.
what's that?
Tell me. No, I'll tell you. You just said these sages.
I was gonna say, so these sages you've met in real life, as it were, you knew of them and sought them out. So I guess my point is like, how many people do you think you've met in your lifetime, and then like, what's your best guess out of the almost 8 billion people on this earth? Like, what percentage of human beings do you think have woke up?
Very little. Point something. And a lot of people who call themselves enlightened, I'm not sure if they're enlightened because I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Like sometimes
There's a lot of scammers and
a
fake
lot of
gurus and stuff. Yeah.
characteristics are like, people getting
And they
angry
might
for
not even even know they're being deceptive. They might actually believe it, and then
Yeah, believe it. Yeah,
it's not the case. Yeah.
But real sages on your fingertips. Sages who could be teachers. I mean, I'm combining that. See, there could be a sage who's working as a sewerage worker, and nobody knows anything about it.
And doesn't tell anybody about any of it.
Nobody.
Yeah. And there's also people that wake up and they don't even know what happened to them. They just all they know is everything's peaceful now, and that's all they need to know.
And a lot of people have landed up in the mental asylum. I'm telling you, a lot of people who are enlightened have landed up in the mental asylum. Osho used to talk about that. Unless they were guided by somebody, post enlightenment, they get crazy. I mean, they think they get crazy. The family takes them to a psychologist who labels them personality disorder and puts them into mental asylum. That has also happened.
Yeah,
but
unfortunately.
But I can tell on my fingertips without naming anybody that there are very few enlightened real teachers who can really get across to the audience, like who can give a method or something.
And yet at the same time, I think it's one of the roadblocks for the seeker. I think the seeker sees this as more rare than it really is. I think it's more common than it might appear, and it's more ordinary than it might seem. So there's probably more sages on the earth than you would imagine. From
the enlightenment and the awakening part, what you say is true. I am looking for an enlightened teacher. Do you understand the combination?
Yeah.
I don't want enlightened sage, is not going to help me unless there is going to be energy transfer. Energy transfer is fine. But if it is going to be teaching, I need to be taught how to fire my sniper rifle on my own temple and kill the me. Is there anybody willing to teach? I am ready to do everything. Come and be at your feet. That's what I say.
Right.
Those are very
few. It's a paradox.
Yeah. Those are very few.
It's a paradox because the seeker would do anything to get this, and yet it can't be given.
Apparently, we don't know. Osho used to say,
seemingly,
post-enlightenment, your original character multiplies a millionfold. Osho was actually a professor of philosophy. I mean, he was a gold medalist as a student. Then he was a lecturer in philosophy. He had honed his skills as a teacher. Even he was enlightened at the age of 21. Then he became one of the greatest oratorical teachers ever in the terms of delivery. A lot of people think he's called as a sex sannyasin, and they think he had 93 Rolls Royces, 4 Lear jets, a lot of women around him. That is only one part of it. I have read the entire Hindu stuff and Buddhist stuff. If there was one man who spoke about everything, it was Osho. It was not Krishna, it was not the Vedic rishis, it was not even Buddha, Jesus, or Ramana Maharishi or Adi Shankar. It was only Osho. And people who have not heard him, they should at least listen to his Patanjali Yoga Sutra. You would have known about it. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, 192 poems. He has spoken 10 volumes on that. The next one is actually Buddha's Dhammapada. I never knew Buddhism, but the moment I read those 10 volumes on his commentary on the Dhammapada of Buddha, I knew everything about Buddhism. This man did, but a lot of people dislike him, especially in the West, because they see only his $2.5 million diamond-studded, wristwatch and the Hollywood robes and his 92 Rolls Royces and his Lear jets. They missed out on his teaching.
See, I don't have a problem with all that side of things. It's just some of the stories, of whatever was going on there. There's a lot going on there, but yeah, there's some. It's undeniable that there is something potent there, at very least.
There was a Netflix documentary, Wild Wild West, I think, which was basically about the secretary, creating a scandal there on the 4 years in which he was silent. He went there and he wanted to create a off-grid, off-government, energy-sufficient environment where you will not be dependent on the government for electricity. He created his own dam, his own water supply, his own organic food, own police stations, own laws, blah, blah, everything was there. Own, I think, even currency sort of. They wanted to experiment on that so that they will be off the government. And then a scandal happened in that and he was kicked out of the United States. But why I revere Osho is that he was a man who walked his talk. For example, Andrew, though a speaker and a teacher and enlightened, you'd be sitting behind a camera and teaching people generally. The truth we speak about, most of us don't live up to that. We talk about it. The truth is but this was the only man, 21 countries threw him out, including India was never ready to accept Osho back because he was so rebellious. His teachings were throw out politics and throw out the priests. Forget all religions, follow your own method, which went against the entire governments of the entire world, and therefore they wanted to kick him out. So I liked him, loved him because of he walked his talk. He was fearless in the outer world
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
Whereas even our all Indian gurus, they will talk behind, and when it comes to a political issue, they will not give their comment. This man was against it. In that
And
way, I
he was
liked him a lot.
radically honest, at least. Yeah, I appreciate
Ah,
radical honesty. That's the
radical,
thing. Like
total
you're saying,
honesty.
yeah. If you're gonna be seemingly hypocritical, be it openly, then it's not
Ah,
hypocritical. Like you're
yeah,
saying, he's
correct.
wearing the watch. He's not hiding that he's got money.
They asked him. They
He's
asked him
showing
actually.
you.
They asked him actually, why are you doing this? He said till 1980, if you see his videos, he's just in an ordinary white robe. Post 1980, when he comes to the US, his one of his secretaries is actually the movie Godfather's producer's wife, who again becomes a co-producer. Her name is Hasya. She becomes his disciple, and then he starts getting all the Hollywood robes and the Rolls Royces.
The
They asked
stage
him,
props. That's how I see it. It looks like stage
stage
props.
props. They
It's
asked
like
him why.
he's got a smirk. He's wearing the funny robe, but he's smirking about it. Like he knows it's
So
silly. He
yeah,
knows what he's
so
doing.
so,
Yeah.
so they ask him why. They ask him, why are you doing this? We have to remember it was not the day of the internet. I'm talking about 1970s and 80s. So he said, when I talk to you about the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, or the Buddha's Dhammapada, you don't come to my cabin. When you see 92 Rolls Royces in my Porsche, and there were 100 peacocks outside, there were 100 peacocks outside his
That
bungalow,
must have been
and
loud.
listen to me, and there were 4 Lear jets, 2 jets only to carry his chair, and you see every day all these things happening around me. You come and CNN comes in to find out who's this fellow who's got 92 Rolls Royces, more than the president of the United States. Who's this guy who's got 4 Lear jets, and who's this guy who's got 100 peacocks? You come in and ask me because of that. Now I teach you the Vedas. Now I teach you the path. So he used it as a ploy or a ruse to bring in people to teach them about spirituality. That was the shift he wanted, but then he was
And that's
sort of
funny too, because what he's doing is all the glitter and tinsel that the ego is attracted to. He doesn't
attracted to
care
it.
about it,
He doesn't care.
probably. He probably could care less about it, but he knew that that's what the ego mind is like. Oh, wow, look at all that.
Look at all
Let's
this.
go check that out. It's like
And if
bait,
you see,
ego bait.
if you see his videos with those Western interviewers, I think CNN, very
Yeah,
humorous to
he's
the
got it.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
that man.
I've heard a lot of crazy allegations and stuff, but I always, at very least, I appreciate rascality, the rebelliousness of people like him or Sadhguru or,
Yeah,
I kind of identify with that. Not identify is the wrong word, but I'm kind of aligned with that. The rebellious kind of don't give a fuck attitude. Yeah. From love though. But yeah, the rebellious I don't care how this looks
no, he
vibe.
was a man who turned spirituality into life and wanted to change the world to a certain degree. One of his aims was, if I have 100 enlightened people with me, I will change the world. That was his target: create 100 enlightened people and throw them to different ashrams, make these ashrams grow up on their own without the government. So when he created in Oregon County his own city, he blocked a river, created his dam, produced his electricity, created his
Yeah,
farm.
sovereignty. Yeah.
So United States, Ronald Reagan was scared. Oh my God, this guy
Oh,
will, if he
sure.
comes for the election, he's going to win the votes. Therefore, they used his secretary. His secretary's name was Sheila. She actually screwed it up. The entire thing was, the entire scam came behind her. That's a big story.
Where are we at with time right now? I have a hard time checking the time on my phone here.
You said 45 minutes. We are at around 120, I think.
We're at 120? Oh no, we're at hour and 20?
Nearly, yeah.
All right, I should probably get going, and I do have other
Sure.
calls lined up for today, but I
Sure,
really
Andrew,
appreciate the conversation, man.
Thank
It was
you,
a good
Andrew.
one.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon, man.
Soon. Bye bye. Take care.
Have a good one. Bye.